Discover the inspiring secrets, an Apache's incredible farms for a son turns into unexpected love. Evan stood amidst the withered rows of corn, a far cry from the vibrant fields his ancestors tended. At 34, the weight of his family's legacy draped over him like a suffocating blanket, each thread woven with the hopes of generations past. With every glance at the sun-baked soil, he felt the unease stir within a cacophony of despair and desperation. The farm, once a sanctuary of laughter and life, now loomed as a ghost of tradition, threatening to slip from his grasp. Foreclosure loomed like storm clouds, and the burden of unfulfilled dreams clawed at his spirit. His father's harsh gaze haunted him, filled with disappointment over Evan's inability to uphold the family legacy in this unforgiving age. As the sun sank below the horizon, casting long shadows that echoed his turmoil, his mind raced with contradictory emotions. Should he stubbornly cling to a dying dream, or should he dare to seek out something different for the sake of survival? Guilt twisted in his gut. This was not merely about land and corn, it was about heritage, about the Apache values that shaped his soul. Yet, what good were values if there was no land to cultivate them? Then came Mia, a spark amidst the drudgery. The agricultural scientist was passionate, bubbling with innovative ideas that could breathe new life into the barren earth. Her enthusiasm was intoxicating, igniting a flicker of hope in the depths of his despair. She spoke of sustainable practices, of a farm that could thrive rather than merely survive. But as their partnership blossomed, so did a growing inner conflict. The weight of his ancestors' expectations clashed with the allure of modern change, a battle raging within him like the desert winds that battered the arid expanse outside. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As their plans took root, an ominous storm brewed on the horizon, an encroaching corporate agribusiness threatening everything he held dear. Silencing that storm meant making a choice: embrace the corporate allure of wealth and modernization or uphold his family's ancestral wisdom. The stakes skyrocketed as whispers of doubt and concern spread through the community, tearing at the fragile fabric of his resolve. Amid growing tensions with Mia, old rivalries resurfaced, driving wedges between them. Guilt clawed at him as accusations flew. Was he turning his back on his father's lessons for fleeting dreams with Mia? The guilt gnawed and twisted, making each breath more unbearable. He envisioned standing in the town hall, his voice trembling as he faced the crowd. Would they see him as a leader or a failure? The deadline to save the farm loomed ever closer, morbid pressure wrapping tightly around his chest. Would he speak up for the legacy that felt nearly lost, risking the tenuous bond he shared with Mia? The echoes of his ancestors roared in his ears, urging him to strive for honor while a part of him yearned for the freedom of a shared future. As Evan gathered the courage to step forward, silent anticipation washed over the room, every eye piercing through him. Here, on his ancestral ground, he stood suspended on the brink of revelation, the ground beneath him trembling with urgency. What choice would he make? Would he surrender to fear, or would he rise to defend everything he fought for, even if it meant scorning the path that beckoned? Evan's heart thundered in his chest, every beat amplified by the tension in the room. He could feel the eyes of his community bearing down on him, some revealing skepticism, others a flicker of hope. The air was thick with unspoken judgments, and an urgent desire to reclaim his family's legacy surged within him, battling against the trepidation of stepping into the new world Mia envisioned. Mia, he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of uncertainty. She turned to him, her eyes gleaming with an enthusiasm he yearned to share. Yet, the chasm between their visions felt like a raging river, too wide to cross. He envisioned their plans teasing life from the earth, yet the roots of doubt tangled around his resolve. If he chose innovation, did that mean relinquishing all that his father stood for? Could he truly honor his heritage while embracing a new path? As evening deepened into night, Evan paced the worn wooden floors of the farmhouse, each creak echoing the nagging questions in his mind. He stared out at the fields, dimly lit under the moonlight, and sought solace in the silence. He remembered tales his father once told him, stories of resilience, of bending without breaking, like the willows by the riverbank. Yet, was simply holding on to tradition enough in a world that refused to wait? In that moment of introspection, something clicked. He recognized that his struggle was not about choosing one over the other, it was about synthesis. The Apache ways of old did not exist in a vacuum. They adapted, evolved. If he could harness Mia's dynamism without discarding the wisdom of his ancestors, perhaps he could carve a new legacy not just for himself but for future generations. Buoyed by this newfound clarity, Evan sought out Mia the next day. He found her bent over charts in the barn, sketching plans for crop rotations that could enrich the soil while preserving its sacredness. "Mia," he said, interrupting her flow. She looked up, and he could see the spark of innovation within her. "What if we blended your ideas with the farming techniques my family has always used?" Her expression shifted in intrigue, and hope surged at the prospect of collaboration. "Tell me what you're thinking," she urged, leaning closer, her pencil poised above the paper. Evan recounted ancestral methods of planting, the rituals surrounding the harvest, the respect for the land and cycles of nature. He could see gears turning in her mind as she began to draft a new plan, one that wove together tradition and modern technique, a tapestry rich with heritage and hope. Yet, doubt crept in again as he recognized the challenge ahead. They would face opposition not just from within, but from the encroaching corporate agribusiness, a force determined to consume their land. This microcosm of conflict was set to ignite, and Evan felt the electric tension spiral into something greater, a test of character. In the days that followed, as they began implementing their hybrid model, Evan's determination grew. New seeds were planted alongside ancient techniques. He felt the ground beneath him shift as he forged a path merging the two worlds. But with every step forward, the anxiety of potential failure shadowed him. What would happen when his community found out? Would he be heralded as a visionary or condemned as a traitor? Tension escalated further when corporate representatives arrived, their polished shoes crunching on gravel, aimed at undermining his efforts. Evan's pulse quickened as words exchanged were thick with confrontation. The time had come to face not only the threats to his farm but to stand resolutely as a custodian of both his past and future. Would he find the strength to marry innovation with tradition and protect what was truly at stake? As the door to confrontation swung open, Evan knew he was on the brink of something pivotal, and what lay ahead might change everything. The following morning dawned, casting a soft glow across the fields, yet Evan's heart was heavy. He awoke with a sense of urgency, a palpable awareness that every choice he made had the potential to tip the scales of his family's legacy. The corporate representatives had sown seeds of doubt, and Evan grappled with the prospect of losing not just his farm but the very ideals he wished to uphold. As he walked through the dewy grass, he couldn't shake the recent confrontation from his mind. The sleek suits and sharp talk of prophets felt alien amidst the rustic tranquility of his world. They represented a mechanized approach to farming that stripped away the soul of the land, reducing it to mere numbers. That realization fortified his resolve. He needed a plan, an actionable strategy that not only salvaged his farm but also conveyed the message that innovation need not sacrifice integrity. Determined, Evan met with Mia at their improvised workstation in the barn. She was already drawing new graphs that showed the potential overlapping benefits of their dual approach. "We can promote what we're doing as a model of sustainability," she suggested, her enthusiasm undeterred. "If we showcase our methods, we can attract more like-minded individuals, mitigate risks, and establish a robust community connection." Evan felt a spark of inspiration igniting within him. What if we document everything? The process, the successes, the struggles. We can create a narrative that tells our story. He was beginning to visualize a path forward, one that could unite both tradition and innovation into something tangible and impactful. As they planned, Evan realized that he had the ability to turn his fears around. What once felt like burdens were now challenges he could face head-on, armed with a clarity of purpose that defined him. His ancestors had faced adversity with gritty determination, and he felt a resurgence of their spirit coursing through him. while Mia tackled charts and strategies, Evan took a moment to step outside and breathe in the familiar scent of the earth. It grounded him, reminded him of the sacredness of the land, and symbolized both his roots and his aspirations. Adjusting his mindset, he embraced the notion that nothing was unattainable. They could create a sustainable farm that resonated with the heritage he cherished, all while adapting to the swift currents of present-day challenges. Their momentum grew with each passing day, but so did the tension surrounding the corporate threat. Rumblings in the community hinted at increased scrutiny, even hostility from those wary of Evan and Mia's partnership. How would he explain their joint venture to the elders who had watched him grow? Would they see him as a visionary or someone who had strayed too far from the ancestral path? Then came the moment of truth and invitation to present their model to the community board. It felt monumental and daunting, a crossroad that would either fortify his standing or unravel it altogether. The prospect of making their case under such scrutiny had his stomach in knots. Yet there was also a flicker of excitement. This would be his chance to communicate his vision, to challenge their perceptions of what farming could mean in this modern world. As the day of the presentation drew nearer, Evan refused to let fear overtake him. Instead, he focused inward, reflecting on his motivations and goals. He had discovered an empowering truth: the collision of his past, present, and future could become a harmonious blend, strengthening rather than fracturing his identity. Yet, as he practiced his speech, Evan's mind drifted to an unsettling realization. The corporate machine would not go unnoticed. Their influence was far-reaching, and now, there were murmurs of hostile tactics to undermine him. He understood he must prepare for a battle not only of ideas but of heart. With their community board meeting hours away, Evan stood at the precipice of transformation. Would he be able to harness the power of innovation while honoring his heritage? And what lengths would the corporate representatives go to silence him before he even began? The stakes had risen, and the time for action had finally arrived. Evan's heart raced as he entered the meeting hall, a modest structure adorned with wooden beams that felt both familiar and intimidating. This was the place where decisions had been made for generations, the weight of tradition pressing down as reminders of his ancestors' toil echoed in his mind. The long table was already populated with familiar faces, their expressions inscrutable. He could sense the skepticism swirling around the room, an invisible barrier born of doubt mixed with curiosity. As he settled into his seat, he glanced at Mia, seated beside him, fingers poised above her notes. The bond they had forged over the past weeks filled him with a sense of trust, making him feel less isolated within the storm of this confrontation. With a deep breath, he mulled over the thoughts that had plagued him. Would their approach be perceived as a betrayal of tradition or as a much-needed evolution? The chairman of the board, an elder known for his firm but fair demeanor, called the meeting to order. After brief pleasantries, he gestured towards Evan and Mia, signaling them to begin their presentation. A spotlight of sorts seemed to land on Evan, illuminating both the possibilities and the vulnerabilities he felt deeply. Clearing his throat, Evan leaned forward, allowing the years of familial heritage to flow through his words. "Thank you for allowing us this opportunity," he began, his voice steady but laced with an urgency that he could not mask. He recounted the history of the farm, weaving in tales of the land, the family values, and what it truly meant to be a steward of the earth. These stories were not just anecdotes, they were the very fabric of his identity. As he transitioned into the heart of their initiative, he described their dual approach: sustainable practices intertwined with innovative technology. He saw nods of interest, yet the skepticism still loomed. It was as if they were waiting for some misstep, ready to pounce on any hint of weakness. Evan felt the enormity of their gaze, each individual a gatekeeper to his aspirations. When Mia took the floor, Evan watched her with pride as she presented their charts, showcasing projected yields and community engagement. Her passion ignited a spark in the room, bridging the gap between traditionalists and innovators. Though he could sense the divide still smoldering beneath the surface, questions began to flow, some curious, others pointed. A local farmer voiced concerns about potential over-reliance on technology. Each inquiry felt like a test, a probing into the depths of their resolve. Evan found himself responding with newfound conviction, carefully choosing words that conveyed both understanding and determination. Crafting answers became a dance of defiance and respect, yet, beneath the layers of dialogue, the unseen threat loomed like a shadow. The corporate representatives hadn't fallen silent, their whispers seeped through the cracks in the community's trust. The thought gnawed at him, clashing with the purpose he was trying to cement. The stakes had escalated since he first stepped into the hall, and it was here, amidst the community's tension, that he now understood something profound. Their perceptions were a reflection not just of what he proposed, but of who he was becoming. As the meeting continued, Evan realized they were not merely discussing farming methods but also grappling with deeper questions about identity, legacy, and the future of their land. This battle was no longer just about the farm, it was about the heart and soul of a community at a crossroads. Just as he began to imagine the possibilities ahead, a sharp voice disrupted his thoughts. And what if this experiment goes wrong? A corporate investor had quietly entered the atmosphere of the meeting, casting a shadow over their hard-fought gains. You could jeopardize everything. The room went still, all eyes now upon Evan, awaiting his next move. The moment had come to confront his deepest fears. Could he turn this challenge into an opportunity? Or would he let the corporate machine dictate the narrative before it even formed? The confrontation loomed large, and as he met the investor's icy gaze, determination swelled within him. Clarity emerged from the chaos. He was ready to fight, armed not just with data but with conviction. Evan made his choice. It was time to defend more than just a farming model. It was time to claim his heritage and advocate for a future that honored both progress and roots. The ball was rolling, and a decisive moment was beckoning. Would he rise to face the challenges awaiting him, or would the stakes be too high? The tension in the room whipped to a climax. This was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Evan felt the weight of every gaze in the room, their expectations swirling around him like a storm. Silence ensued after the investor's sharp words, a thick atmosphere filled with doubt. He inhaled deeply, letting the air fill his lungs as he squared his shoulders. This wasn't merely about defending their concept, it was a defining moment for him, a chance to carve his identity anew among the echoes of his predecessors. Let me address that concern, he began, his tone steadier than he felt. Risk is inherent in any innovation, but so is opportunity. I believe farming, like any other profession, must evolve. Our approach is one that respects tradition while also embracing new methods. We are not discarding our roots, we are ensuring they find nourishment in the future. As he spoke, he sensed Mia's supportive gaze, the unwavering confidence in her eyes urging him forward. He elaborated on how previous generations had faced their own challenges, their resilience had propelled their legacy. Our farm is not just a patch of land, it's a living community, and with that comes responsibility. If we don't adapt, we risk not only our livelihood but our identity. The murmurs from the group shifted slightly. Evan could see a glimmer of understanding in some faces, but the corporate investor remained unmoved, arms crossed tightly over his chest. The contrast stoked a fire within Evan. How much had he internalized the fear of failure, fearing the darkness lurking within the vision he crafted? In a split second, he assessed the stakes, both personal and professional. Imagine, he pressed on, the ability to not only predict crop yields but also to improve them. By utilizing new technology, we can minimize waste and maximize our productivity while still respecting our land. Isn't that what we all want? A legacy that thrives? Evan's words took on a rhythm, growing more impassioned as he leaned into the conviction that had guided him through long nights of planning and anxiety. Slowly, he noticed others nodding, a subtle shift in the atmosphere as collective doubt began to dissolve. What if this was the moment he unearthed not just an initiative but a personal epiphany? But just as he started to sense a breakthrough, the investor scoffed, cutting through the newfound momentum. And what guarantees do you have? Guarantees mean nothing in agriculture, it's all about the unpredictable elements. You'll lose everything. Evan's heart pounded. This was no longer just a professional dispute, it felt personal. He could feel the latent fear burgeoning. What if the investor was right? What if this gamble ended in devastation? Yet beneath that fear, a flicker of rebellion ignited within him. I cannot guarantee the weather, but I can guarantee our commitment to adapt and learn. Each word was a pulse of determination, his conviction spilling over. "I stand before you not just as a representative of my family's farm, but as someone who believes deeply in the future we can create. The path forward is unpredictable, yes, but I'd rather navigate the storm together than succumb to complacency." As silence descended once again, Evan's breath quickened, anticipation flooding the space. He had spoken his truth, unfurling the complexities of his journey and aspirations. Could he draw strength from this confrontation, or would he wilt under its pressure? The chairman of the board cleared his throat. "Let us consider the data you've provided and think critically about your proposal." But just as Evan's hope began to swell, the investor leaned forward, eyes narrowed, and asked, "What will you do when it fails?" That question struck a nerve, dragging Evan deeper into self-analysis. Was he prepared for the fallout? The flood of self-doubt threatened to drown him as he wrestled with the consequences of his ambitions. This was more than a test of resolve, it was a crucible of his identity, laying bare his deepest fears and truest desires. In the eye of this tempest, Evan felt the spark of resilience cast against the dark. He may not have the answers to the investor's abrupt question, but one truth rang clear: this journey had already begun to redefine him. Would he emerge from this gauntlet emboldened, or would a fissure in his resolve split him apart? The tension hovered like a double-edged sword, ready to cut through what remained unexamined. The battle for his own self-worth had just begun. The moment had arrived for Evan to confront more than just external skepticism. Would he seize it, or would he retreat into the shadows of his fears? Evan's heart raced, the investor's question echoing in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. He felt the walls of the room closing in, a cacophony of uncertainty that threatened to engulf him. The hands of the clock seemed to grind to a halt, each tick amplifying his internal chaos. He needed clarity, a plan, or at the very least, a semblance of control. Taking a deep breath, he shifted his focus back to his proposal, recalling the intricacies of the technology they intended to implement. The system was designed not only to monitor crops but to assess environmental variables, predict outcomes, and adapt in real time. It was more than a safeguard, it was a lifeline. But did he truly believe in its efficacy? Failure is a possibility, he admitted aloud, surprising himself with the weight of his own admission. But it can also be a teacher. We are not aiming for perfection, we are striving for progress. The words felt like liberation, a crack in the dam of his anxiety. He sensed the shift. Instead of framing failure as a crumbling disaster, he could now view it as exploration. This wasn't merely about sustaining a tradition, it was about growth and exploration, emboldening those who came after him to embrace the uncertain. The board members exchanged glances, some appeared intrigued, while others held veneers of skepticism. Still, he pressed on, emboldened by a combination of fear and hope. Learning from our missteps allows us to innovate. If we put in the groundwork, the community we cultivate will adapt, too. That was the crux of his argument. The project extended beyond technology, reaching into the very fabric of their identity. As he spoke, he wove together thoughts of the family legacy with the potential for a sustainable future. Each sentence enveloped in conviction, Evan began to envision the impact they could have, not just on their farm but on the broader agricultural landscape. You see, he continued, this venture is not just about yields and profits, it's about inspiring a new generation of farmers. It's about nurturing a culture of resilience and creativity in a profession that has long stood still amid technological advances elsewhere. With each word, the resolve deep within him solidified. No longer was he simply defending a proposal, he was articulating a vision. Evan finally realized that his fight wasn't just for his family's farm. It was for farmers everywhere who hesitated at the barrier of innovation, terrified to change what had long been deemed unchangeable. As he explored the myriad possibilities, something within him shifted, a tether connecting his current ambitions to inherited dreams. This endeavor was not solely in his hands, it was part of a continuum. The faces around him became clearer, his family's legacy flickered in their expressions. It became evident that they too held desire for renewal, for a future where their stories didn't simply vanish into obscurity. Then came the pivotal moment. The investor's expression changed. No longer just a skeptic, he leaned forward, intrigue slanting his brow. But how can you ensure that your passion will pivot into practicality? Caught off guard, Evan paused, grappling with the immediate weight of that challenge. Could he articulate not just argument, but a strategy that grounded his enthusiasm in reality? He felt the pressure mounting, but alongside emerged an exhilarating surge of empowerment. Drawing from the experience of his ancestors, he realized that this was not just about his vision, it was also about collaboration, about pacing the discourse of growth with those who shared the land around him. I can ensure that by building a network of support and mentorship within our community. Success is not just a solitary journey, it is forged with the input and collaboration of those who care about the outcome. Would he merely offer words, or would he channel his resolve into direct action? The rhythm of his heart steadied, as the clarity of purpose settled, sowing the seeds of determination deep within. This was his defining moment. But, one question loomed just beyond the horizon: how far was he willing to go to prove both his worth and the viability of his vision? The tension simmered in the air, a rousing prelude to a challenge Evan had yet to fully confront. Would the next step plunge him into deeper waters, or could he harness this swell of momentum to build something profound? As he stood at this intersection of ambition and reality, one thing was painfully clear: the battle for his professional identity was far from over. Evan wiped his palms hastily against his pants as the boardroom fell silent. The investor's question hung in the air, pressuring him to deliver an answer that would shape not only the course of his proposal but, potentially, his whole future. The air felt thick with expectation, but Evan leaned into the challenge instead of retreating. I want to create a program that allows farmers to help one another. Think of it as a mentorship initiative, where we share insights, failures, and successes. A structure that empowers everyone involved, he proposed, drawing from the depths of his conviction. Knowledge is the bridge to progress. It sounded good, perhaps even brilliant, but in the pit of his stomach, doubt stirred. Would they believe him? Evan sensed a pivotal decision within himself: to project unwavering confidence or show the cracks of uncertainty. He committed to believing in his vision, not just for his sake but for the farmers whose lives depended on innovation and resilience. Yet, he continued, lifting his chin slightly, this doesn't just rely on me. It requires us as a community to take a leap, to reveal our vulnerabilities to each other. Evan watched as the faces around him shifted from skepticism to reflection. They were grappling with the implications of what he proposed. His heart raced, not with fear but with exhilaration. He was in uncharted territory, attempting to redefine not just his future, but the identity of a farming community that clung to tradition, but self-doubt lurked like a permanent shadow. What if he failed? What if he misjudged the readiness of the others? In his mind, he pictured his father and grandfather, their hands gnarled from years of toil, their faces weathered by an unyielding sun. The weight of their sacrifices pressed upon him with each unspoken word. They had fought battles of their own, ones that left scars both visible and invisible. Just as the air thickened with tension, the investor, clearly processing Evan's ideas, leaned back slightly and offered a nod. A network can provide sustainability. But how do you intend to mobilize this community? People are set in their ways, he remarked, challenging Evan anew. This time, Evan felt a different kind of empowerment. The notion of mobilizing wasn't just an operational challenge, it was a rallying call. He needed to ignite passion and curiosity, something not easily achieved in a field that often dismissed change. By demonstrating early wins, he answered, firming his voice with newfound determination. We start small, showcasing how innovative practices can yield better fruit and reduce waste. Once they see results, once our own neighbors experience the benefits, they will want to be part of this journey. As he spoke, a surge coursed through him, a blend of urgency and enthusiasm that pushed out doubt. Each sentence sculpted a more vivid picture of the future he envisioned, one filled with possibilities. The earlier fears began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet yet fierce determination, yet, an itch of anxiety still tickled the back of his mind. Would he be able to lead his neighbors through doubt and skepticism? As a young man canvassing for change, did he possess the gravity needed to garner respect and trust? Evan knew he was on the brink of something vital. To maneuver through this maze of doubt, he would not only need to rally support but also to confront his own insecurities head-on. It became clear, the road ahead was not merely about technology benefits. It would demand a personal transformation, one marked by vulnerability and courage. He would have to reconcile the farmer he was with the visionary he aspired to be. The struggle was evident, a growing intensity within him that crystallized the enormity of the task lay before him. As the meeting passed the halfway mark, Evan's mind raced with strategy and possibility. How would he convert theoretical frameworks into actionable growth, inspire others to leap into the unknown, and, most importantly, come to terms with his own self-worth as a leader? He took a deep breath, preparing to articulate not just a plan but the heart behind it, his heart. Little did he know, the deeper he dove into that truth, the more he would also unveil the shadows lurking in his past. Just as he braced himself to answer, a harsh comment from one of the dissenting board members cut through the air like a knife. "You can't just wish for change to happen, Evan. What if it doesn't work?" The challenge lay bare before him, and as he prepared to defend his vision, he understood it marked the beginning of a personal odyssey, a reckoning with every failure he had ever known and the realization of who he truly wanted to become. Could he muster the resolve to transform criticism into a catalyst for progress? In that moment, the stakes rose sharply, and Evan understood he was now on a collision course with the hardest truth he had yet to face, a confrontation that would require all of his courage and ingenuity. Evan felt the edge of his resolve wavering as the board member's words reverberated in the sterile air of the boardroom. The room seemed to shrink, leaving him alone with the weight of expectation, which was now heavier than ever. He blinked rapidly, shaking off the fear that threatened to swallow him whole. "Change isn't merely a wish, it's a strategy," Evan replied, each word deliberate. He drew from the well of convictions that had brought him here. But strategy requires trust, and trust is built through action. "I'm prepared to invest my effort into showing how this can work." He sensed the skepticism around him, but he also saw a flicker of something deeper in the investor's eyes, a glimmer of curiosity paired with caution. This could work, he thought. He had to believe that. In the silence, he contemplated the enormity of his commitment, aware that each decision he made was a stepping stone toward becoming the leader he wanted to be. But the dissenting voice continued to echo in his mind. What if it didn't work? Was he prepared to face that truth? Leaning into the challenge took an enormous amount of strength, and why did he fear so much? In that moment, he realized the battle wasn't just external. It was within himself, grappling with the fragments of his past that clung to him like shadows. He remembered the failures he had faced, the missed opportunities, the doubts that had stifled his ambitions. A seed of determination sprouted within him, challenging the narrative he often believed, that he was simply a farmer, not a leader, not a visionary. With each thought, he felt the tension morphing into clarity. If he could channel that uncertainty into something proactive, excitement could flourish. He could face the impending criticism from his peers not as an impediment, but as an avenue to showcase his resilience and belief in a better future. "Perhaps what I propose isn't perfect. Yes, there's a risk of failure," he conceded, adopting a tone of transparency. "But in every great success story, there's a history of failures. Those failures taught lessons. They honed skills. Perhaps after failing, we return wiser and more prepared. Isn't that worth pursuing?" He witnessed a shift in the room as various reactions crossed the faces of the board members. There were signs of contemplation, some nodded while others leaned back, considering the underlying truth in his words. Evan felt the crack in his confidence begin to tighten, weaving resilience into his narrative. "Let's talk about what the practical steps look like," he proposed, shifting gears. "We start with a pilot project, one farm experimenting with organic practices. We record the outcomes, both positive and negative, and share them openly. This isn't about sweeping changes, it's about incremental steps rooted in transparency." His heart pounded as he took this new direction, half expecting pushback. Instead, the investor leaned closer, visibly intrigued. "You believe people will share openly enough to learn through failures?" "Absolutely," Evan said, emboldened. The honest exchange of failures leads to collective growth. It struck him then, he would need to anchor himself not just in his ideas but in the authenticity of his story. He could connect with their hesitations as he connected with his own. Being vulnerable about his journey would demonstrate to others that there was strength in openness. This embarked him on an uncharted, yet thrilling path, yet, as he stoked this emerging vision, doubt whispered softly, what if sharing too much of himself painted him as unfit to lead? He was suddenly aware of a fine line he had to tread between vulnerability and authority. Every aspect of this next phase was laced with challenge. How would he embody both a guide and a peer? Could he balance personal revelations while maintaining the respect of his community? The meeting closed and Evan left the boardroom, invigorated yet anxious. There was a palpable shift in him, the realization that growth necessitated stepping into discomfort, confronting his past, and gathering strength from his vulnerabilities. As he walked, he glanced down at his hands, which had till now only grasped tools for tilling the earth, now ready to plant seeds of knowledge. But deep within, uncertainty gnawed at him. He was not just about to lead a project, he was navigating through the quagmire of his own identity. What awaited him outside these walls was just as daunting. Evan recognized that change was not only the path ahead, it also demanded revisiting who he was and finding ways to reconcile with himself. The echoing question of trust clung to him. Could he foster not only the trust of farmers in his project, but also cultivate trust in his own vision of himself? As he pondered this, Evan felt a shift. The moment of truth was coming, where he would define not only his proposal but also the leader he was becoming. Little did he know, the next challenge was already on the horizon, ready to test every ounce of his new resolve. Evan stepped out of the sterile confines of the boardroom into the blinding daylight, the hum of the world bustling around him contrasting sharply with the tension that had filled the room moments earlier. He inhaled deeply, trying to draw in confidence alongside the air filling his lungs. Despite the vivid sunlight, shadows loomed over his internal landscape, doubts, regrets, and the fear of inadequacy that were as entrenched as the roots of the old oak trees lining the streets. Today had been a turning point. For the first time, he had voiced his vision, a plan dependent on transparency, on sharing both successes and failures. Yet even as those words had flowed, he struggled with the implications. Trust, as he had argued, was built on open vulnerability. But did exposing his own fears and failures render him weak or, counterintuitively, make him stronger? It was a question he grappled with deeply. When he arrived at the small farm he operated outside town, the familiar sights greeted him, the faded barn, the rows of crops swaying gently in the breeze, and the patches of earth awaiting tilling. It should have felt like home, a sanctuary from expectations. Instead, those very expectations morphed into an unyielding weight on his shoulders. All eyes would be on him, friends, family, the farmhands. Were they merely supportive, or were they skeptically waiting for him to fail? Evan stood on the threshold of the barn, slipping his fingers over the rough-hewn wooden doorframe. Could he transform this farm not just into a space of productivity, but into an incubator for innovation and collaboration? For too long, he had clung to traditional ways of farming, fearing the unknown and the rejection of his peers. But now, as he prepared to introduce his new ideas, his shoulders tensed with unresolved anxiety. His mind flashed back to the faces in the boardroom, their brows furrowed, mouths pressed into straight lines of skepticism. Would his friends here echo their doubts? Today was just the beginning. What if the pilot project failed? What if the hard truths he embraced felt more like defeats than lessons? Each thought tightened the grip of unease around his heart. "Hey Evan!" A voice called from the field, jolting him into the present. It was Lena, one of his oldest friends and a radical thinker when it came to sustainable farming practices. Her usual enthusiastic demeanor was unmistakable, but as he approached, he noticed the flicker of concern in her expression. "Are you all right?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Just thinking about the plan," he sighed, attempting to summon a smile that felt more habitual than genuine. "You're not backing down, are you?" Her laughter chipped at the armor of doubt encasing him. "I have to show them something different," he responded, fervently believing it but feeling the insecurity sneak back in. "Well, you can't change the world in a day, Evan. But what you're doing matters. Come here," she said, gesturing to a small plot of land where they had sporadically tested new crops. "Just show me what you've got in mind. Let us work on it together." A shift occurred within him, the reminder that he didn't have to carry this burden alone. Perhaps opening up to others wasn't just about vulnerability, it could forge bonds that would help him cultivate not only trust but also innovative strategies. The inadequacies he feared might even spark collaboration, enriching his vision through shared insights. With new urgency igniting his spirit, Evan knelt beside her, the soil cool and inviting beneath his fingertips. As they began their work, he dared to share his thoughts about the project, the pilot, and the fears gnawing at him. Instead of judgment, he found empathy, encouragement, and a passion that mirrored his own. "This is the first step, Evan," Lena said, her eyes bright with determination. "You're sowing seeds of change. Let us nurture them together." The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows stretching across the soil, yet something deep within him flickered a budding realization that collaboration could transform vulnerability into strength. But even as he excitedly mapped out their next steps, a pervasive feeling tugged at him. The deeper his connections grew, the more vulnerable he'd become to others' perceptions. Could he maintain the essence of the leader he aspired to be while revealing so much of himself? As dusk fell, Evan packed up, compelled by an unsettling thought. The stakes were rising, and clarity would not come without confrontation. With every ounce of resolve urging him forward, he felt a rift widening between who he believed he must be and the leader he was beginning to become. What awaited him in the impending days would be a test not only of his professional ambition but of his very identity. Would he be able to rise to the challenge, or would the shadows of self-doubt engulf him anew? As he locked the barn door behind him, Evan sensed that the real journey was only just beginning. Evan stood at the front of the farm, the vibrant colors of sunrise flickering across what had once been a desolate stretch of land. After months of effort, both to revitalize the farm and confront his internal struggles, he was finally ready to present their results, an innovative fusion of tradition and modern agriculture. The soil that once felt like a graveyard of dreams now breathed with renewed life, symbolizing both the rebirth of his family's legacy and his own evolution as a farmer. The hybrid farming model they developed with Mia had flourished beyond expectations. The crops, a mixture of ancient methods interwoven with sustainable practices, thrived, capturing the community's interest. It was a living testament of resilience, an embodiment of adapting without losing sight of roots. Evan's heart brimmed with pride. He stood ready, no longer a hesitant descendant of his ancestors' shadows but a confident steward of their legacy. He had realized that he could not merely defend tradition, he needed to proactively showcase its relevance in modern contexts. The community board meeting had transformed into not just a presentation of figures, but a narrative illustrating woven stories of both struggle and triumph. Evan had appealed to emotions and clear potential, drawing connections that resonated with his own experience of vulnerability and rebirth. As he prepared for the gathering, he felt a surge of anticipation mixed with purpose. He was about to speak to a crowd that had once doubted him, his friends, mentors, and even those who had clung rigidly to traditional values. Evan had prepared meticulously. With charts in one hand and the warmth of conviction in the other, he was ready to illuminate the path forward, knowing that potential lay merely latent without the courage to awaken it. When he stood before the crowd, the familiar faces blurred together like an abstract painting, filled with emotion, question, and anticipation. Each gaze felt like a weight testing his resolve, and yet, Evan welcomed the challenge. He had grown and now, he welcomed adversity as a necessary force for growth. As he began to speak, his voice resonated with strength. Today, we stand on the brink of transformation not only for our land but for our community. Each word flowed with a blend of authenticity and authority, unearthing a passion he had feared might remain dormant forever. He illustrated not just the farming initiative they'd established but shared the deeper lesson he had learned, a collective journey, intertwined with both failures and successes. This project isn't just a new way of farming, it's a commitment to change, a commitment to one another, he declared, his voice steady. It's about forging connections across generations, to inspire each other just as our ancestors did. Together, we grow, together, we survive. The crowd responded with nods, murmurs, and a palpable shift in the air. Curiosity replaced skepticism. In that moment, Evan understood, his power did not rest solely in the innovative methods he proposed, it also stemmed from the acceptance of his own vulnerability and the strength derived from it. By unveiling his uncertainties and inviting the community into the experience, he cultivated unity rather than division. As the meeting unfolded, the responses he received were unexpectedly constructive. Not only did the board members engage, but they extended invitations for collaboration. Fellow farmers expressing interest in the practices Evan had courageously presented. He felt that for the first time, he was building bridges instead of walls, igniting new alliances framed in hope rather than fear. Weeks passed, and with every update from their pilot project, the farm transformed into a bustling hub of cooperation. Farmers shared insights and successes, nurturing not just crops but each other's aspirations. The surrounding community embraced the initiative wholeheartedly, encouraging the notion that adaptation did not equate to betrayal, it meant honoring the legacy handed down by their ancestors. Evan stood firm and proud. Before a sea of faces that once embodied hesitance, now radiating belief and optimism. He had become not just a leader but a figure recognized and respected for his courage to blend the past with the future. The connections he had forged and the growth he had inspired validated his journey towards self-acceptance. In the heart of this transformation, Evan had unearthed something profound, a deep, unshakable confidence in himself. He had conquered his fears and turned them into fuel for progress. He had taken his heritage and spun it into a vibrant future, effectively embodying the essence of both innovation and tradition. As he looked out across the fields that had become a canvas for his newfound vision, equanimity washed over him. This was not merely a story of farming, it was a narrative of transformation, a stake claimed in the legacy of his family and a step boldly taken into the embrace of authenticity. Evan's journey confirmed what he had subconsciously known all along. Greatness stemmed not from perfection or certainty but from the heart's willingness to embrace both risk and opportunity. Now was the moment to inspire others. The journey continued beyond just the farm, and he knew that this transformation would uplift not only him but all who dared to strive for growth, silently beckoning them into a future marked by resilience, innovation, and community. Don't wait even one more second to share this story. You need to subscribe now to catch the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment with your reactions and theories on Evan's journey. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need this inspiration. Your involvement makes a difference. Stand with us and support the mission of personal overcoming and growth.